Right, okay, well, the first 2 points there are more for any recruiters in the room. But the second part is obviously, as just explained, the secondment. Now, I visited lots of bureaux around the country, and on debt cases especially, it was striking. Almost everyone who came in mentioned their mental health problems. In fact, probably for the first 5 minutes of their chats, it seemed more like a GP's room, rather than actually advice centre. And someone whose finance background hadn't appreciated this. This was quite striking. So I thought, well, okay, let's look a bit further into this. So, did a literature review, and indeed it said that there is, a lot of literature on mental health and debt, but actually less at the point of sale, which from someone who has a financial sales background was also striking. It seems to be more at the back end, more at collections. So this is also, despite my regulatory background, the FCA having specific guidance on the processes in place, for fair treatment of customers at the point of sale. So did some work on this, and Citizens Advice are very supportive of this. They said, okay, Alex, you've identified this, away you go. So away I did. And so reviewed the literature in more depth, conducted a survey which I called the experiences of CAB advisors with clients who are in debt, and also undertook a series of interviews and group discussions with CAB staff from the financial services industry and academia. So the findings will be published, it says, in November, hopefully very soon, in the next couple of weeks. It's just in the final legal checks, because I want this to be a powerful report. The last thing I want to go and happen is some firm putting it up on technicality. So this really is a preview. Summarising the presentation. So, the scale of the problem. Now, some people will be aware of these stats, some won't, but it's still very striking. 1 in 11 people in the UK have debt arrears, but that rises to 1 in 4 of those with mental health problems and 1 in 3 with a psychotic condition. Now, if we look at CAB clients in particular, it really demonstrates this. These are more vulnerable consumers. They have lower household income, they're more likely to be reliant solely on benefits, and although the debts are lower overall, they have a higher amount of individual debts. So if you do a quick mathematical calculation there, if you divide 4.93 debts into 7,400, you get, I think in the region of £1,300 worth of individual debts there. Now that suggests a lower amount of debts, sometimes that's payday, that's probably a lower amount of individual debt, we usually come with a higher interest rate. So not only do we have consumers vulnerable low income, they're probably engaged in more vulnerable forms of lending. So, what have firms done? Now, the last thing I want to go and do here is do a bashing of all firms and say nothing's been done at all, because there has been some good stuff. In 2005, there was the Money Advice Liaison Group, MALG, and this is set up various work streams on good practice. It says debt and mental health evidence form, and also guidance into debt collection and mental health, 10 steps to improve recovery. And also, we've been involved in this. We've said, Citizens Advice, CAB and the BBA, along with Money Advice Trust, issued How to Do the Right Thing in 2011, which was a guide to best practice in helping people with financial difficulty manage their debt problems. One of the areas was mental health. But one of the striking things about this is it's more towards the back end. It's more to do with collections and when people get into trouble. It's not really identifying it up front. So it comes back to that point earlier in literature. It is, yes, there's lots of research into this, but why not when people are actually getting the product? So there's been some research into this. The Royal College of Psychiatrists and Money Advice Trust have asked this question, not in too much detail, but they've identified some points as to why firms maybe aren't asking or delving into too much detail at the point of sale. Firstly, there's the issue of conflating mental capacity and mental health. So firms are just assuming that someone has a mental health condition and they're not looking at the wider capacity issues. Now there's lots of people with mental health conditions who can quite happily go and use financial services products, yet often the firms will then conflate the two, and then people with those conditions will be fearful of probably accessing the credit in the first place, which is just simply, it's denying people credit where they could easily use it. Secondly, relying on customer disclosure. And this is probably customers. I mean, let's be honest, trust in financial services isn't huge full stop at the moment. So if you have a mental capacity or mental health condition on top of that, are you going to be willing to go and disclose that to institutions which, I say, aren't trusted full stop? You may be extra fearful given your condition. Thirdly, neglecting the legal need to support decision making. There's lots of assessing, but rather than actually supporting the customers, because again, lots of these customers can actually be profitable customers and access this credit properly. The focus is less on support, it's rather autonomous assessing instead. And also treating mental capacity as a lifelong state. Quite often it isn't, but you try telling that to a bank system, it's often treated as it is. So basically it's overlooking of the mental capacity issue, as it says there. It's placing the onus on customers to disclose, and it comes back to the point, but customers are fearful of disclosing, and I'll touch on this point later on in the presentation. So, we have this issue. Customers are in the dark, they don't know how firms are going to treat their information. Firms are in the dark because the right information isn't been identified. Now, Mind looked into this in 2011 in the Red survey, and it found that the vast majority of respondents didn't believe that their creditors were aware of their mental health problems when taking out a loan. And despite detailed guidance legislation on capacity, customers have been sold loans where decision-making was impaired to an extent where under firms' legal and regulatory obligations may not have been appropriate to extend them credit. So there is this gap. The Mind survey is probably the only major piece of actual research I found out there which asked this question at the point of sale, which obviously then led us logically to go and do our own survey. So survey is done in collaboration with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. It was a national survey. We got 257 detailed responses between May and June, and we went on the issue of capacity, asking whether people had a condition, what was the effect of capacity, and if it was noticeable to a lender. And it does reveal, it echoes the Mind survey. It reveals significant issues in terms of dealing with customers with mental health at the point of sale. So, coming back to those meetings I had in the Bureau, the hunch is confirmed. The majority of debt clients do have a mental health condition. This was confirmed in my Bureau visits, confirmed in our survey, confirmed in the Mind survey as well. And it is just as condition. It's not a one-size-fits-all condition. There are lots of different conditions listed there, from depression being the most common at just under 45% of responses. The other ones there, anxiety at 15%. Schizophrenia at 5%. So it's a wide range of conditions. The important point there is, of course, different conditions need different treatment. Again, if we look at how customers are treated by financial services firms, the systems, it's enough effort to go and get them to recognise a mental capacity and mental health full stop, let alone the whole wide range of conditions. So we then got this issue of capacity, and again, this is advisors judging the client's ability here. It's in, as it says, just under 30% affect the ability to answer questions and discuss the loan. Just about 40% on terms and conditions. And then the important thing at the bottom there is recall, affecting the ability to remember what they've been told. Although, quite frankly, that is not something just obviously exclusive to if you have a mental health condition. And I think lots of people in the room would confess, financial services products can be very complex. And can you remember what you're told afterwards? So it's a capacity issue, but not exclusive to people with mental capacity. So the key question is, would these points have been noticeable, these issues in capacity have been noticeable to the lender? And on balance, it was felt by respondents that it probably wouldn't have been noticeable. This was scaled on 1 to 5. So the people themselves know that they have these conditions which may affect the capacity, but they're not disclosing it to the lenders for various reasons, which we'll look into. So we've also looked in the survey at some free text responses to get the picture behind customers' feelings when they are engaging with financial services firms. So it came in 4 key categories, which is clients not fully control their finances, not engaging with a lender, or even family or friends to discuss the debt. It's the embarrassment issue. Feeling that firms didn't ask them sufficiently about their condition of finances, and also actually just not understanding their debt or financial position and its implications. So the example quote I have up there, I think is a nice, there's lots of quotes I can go and give you, but this I think summarises all those issues quite neatly. So, what the survey concludes is there are many clients who have mental health and capacity issues at the point of sale. However, it's not noticeable or isn't picked up by lenders. And it's also noticeable that the most frequent free text response relates to customers not feeling in control of their finances. But that implies that often customers acknowledge their capacity issues, but even though there's not then frequently disclosed to the lenders. So, given the risk posed to lenders not identifying these conditions, it's surprising, in terms of default, it's surprising that those conditions aren't picked up more at the point of sale. There's a financial risk to the lender, as well as the individual. So what we did was in the back of the survey, we identified people to come to some workshops to look at this issue, speak to individual lenders and DCA Bureau members and academics to understand why that should be the case. So, as I said, we interviewed the CAB staff and the academics, and we came and the lenders, and we identified these issues. Customers have concerns with disclosure. That's the point we've been making throughout the presentation. It's really came through here. Firms are also concerned about discrimination and probing too far. Lots of people actually in firms want to do the right thing, but they're scared that they're going to be tripped up by legislation. However, some firms just are negligent of legislation and their obligations, which is probably a particular concern for me in the Financial Conduct Authority, given we've just, under consumer credit, taken on a whole load of extra firms. That's a real concern there. Now, some firms are trying to do the right thing. They acknowledge a lack of training and experience in their staff, but there are examples of good practice. And also, the rise of online lending is a concern, because where there is good practice among firms, it's often in branch where people are asked questions. Now, from a personal point of view, I needed a new car earlier this year. I went into the branch, the person gave me the nth degree on those questions, and said I had to go and come back and bring them loads more paperwork. He then almost tapped his nose and said, but you can go, you do have a good credit rating, you can go online. And sure enough, I went online, 3 clicks later, £8,000 was in the bank account. Now, this was demonstrated it to myself. It was a scary difference. So firms saying, yes, we have the processes. Yes, but are you doing it consistently between platforms? And they're not. And as there's more of a shift towards online banking, that's only going to become more of a risk. So, comes back to point. Consumers and firms are in the dark. How do we change this? Basically, I don't want to be too downbeat here. It is really by calling on firms to evaluate how they can go and help customers with mental capacity issues, building those relationships of trust, and encouraging early disclosure. So what this report, when it comes up next month, isn't a magic wand that's going to solve everything, but the intention of it will be to go and encourage debate and get customers just to look at this issue at the point of sale. So specifically, we need to consider how can the training of staff be improved so that it creates an environment that encourages disclosure, picks up the signs of capacity problems, and then gives people appropriate support. Because those customers appropriately supported it helps them, it helps their well-being, and also for the firms, they can be profitable customers. And then, would a more transparent and supportive explanation of customers about what happens to their information make them more willing to disclose mental health conditions? There's some evidence that it does, but there isn't enough research there. So by doing this signposting, would it make more people come forward and feel they're supported? Also, setting up best practice groups to learn from each other. And then at that point on accessing credit online, is this a risk? And also considering if the fact that these conditions are disclosed at the point of sale, could it be used to predict subsequent defaults and help firms develop strategies to avoid them and support their customers? And finally, I'm putting this both hats here. As the regulator, I'm guilty of this. Our sourcebook needs to provide greater clarity on guidance and capacity. In fact, our sourcebook would probably provide greater clarity on a lot of things, but particularly on this issue here. We need to be clearer in giving firms support on their obligations so they are more aware of it. Now, I've had some feedback on this report so far, and one of the real refrains is, well, if people just go and disclose their conditions, then firms won't go and give them credit, full stop. I mean, that is a refrain, and that's not what's going to happen. It's more subtle than that. And I guess the retort to that thing is it then acceptable just to sweep this problem under the carpet and let collections deal with it? Because that's what's happening at the moment. Collections are dealing with it. Some firms are good at supporting their customers when they're in financial stress. Some aren't. But it is. There will be real issues of discrimination, issues of basically almost the human right, the right to go and have credit. I don't pretend to have an easy solution to that, but it is far better to go and ask those difficult, sometimes awkward questions about striking that balance between giving people support, getting them disclosed at the point of sale, credit where it's appropriate, rather than at the moment asking nothing, hoping for the best, and then seeing where there isn't good support, customers suffering unnecessarily. So the headline there at the end of it sums it up. There are no clear answers to this issue, but that is not an excuse not to act. Thank you.